Hello, witchy people. You may be wondering why I'm sat here in the dark with nothing but a cup of coffee, a solitary lit candle, and a snoring dog to keep me company. Well, many years ago, I used to run a website called the Haunted ChaCha. And on that site, I would write down the tales that people had told me, not necessarily ghost stories, just tales of strange happenings, weird goings on in strange places, eerie places, places that were supposedly haunted, maybe. So if you want to hear a few, grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and I'll tell you some. This story is called The Haunted Parkland. Looking back to my childhood, I can recall several times when I was perhaps seeing something that others couldn't. There were some occasions, however, when that wasn't the case. Sometimes everyone was experiencing exactly the same as me. I had not long turned 4 years old, and my mum Mary decided to take my brother Gary and myself on a picnic, along with our neighbour Dawn and her 2 children, Adam and Lucy. It was a bright sunny day, with no clouds and not even a breeze to stir the air, so Dawn and Mary decided to take all of us children to the local park. After we got there, we quickly devoured our small picnic. Gary had already gone off exploring through the surrounding trees, and we could hear him giving hoots and cheers playing cowboys and Indians, with Adam quickly running to join in the fun. Lucy and I were pretending to be princesses, spinning around bushes and trees, twirling our imaginary frocks studded with pretend diamonds and lace. This park was a place we all knew well, even the surrounding trees and where each pathway led. Not far from where we sat to eat our picnic, there was a small maze and a flower garden for the public to walk around. All the children, including me, were getting bored of our make-believe games. So Mary packed up what was left of the picnic, and we all set off to take a long walk through the wooded area to reach the flower garden. There the mothers could sit and rest, while us 4 children could run around the maze, burning off some excess energy. We all set off up a well-walked path, studded with stepping planks and lined with thick bushes. We all knew that it led directly upwards, around a curve, to a small bowling green. From there, it was just a short walk around the groundsman's building to the flower garden. On this day, however, the pathway didn't take us to where we wanted or expected to go. Whether it was the children who became too quiet first, or if it was the birds stopping their singing and trilling first, I don't know. I don't think any of us there that day could say for sure, but it had gone very quiet, much too quiet. The sun should have been sending dappled light through the canopy of the oak and the pine trees, through the rhododendrons, but it was dark and damp, and the smell of the earth itself seemed cloying and dank. Although we had all been to this park hundreds of times, we knew where every pathway led, we were lost. We couldn't even hear the traffic from a road that should have been only a few hundred yards away by now. Looking back, I believe that my mum and Dawn must have been quite scared themselves, but they both made their children believe that we were all having an adventure, that it was a game. Imagine the relief then, when a small house came into sight, along a narrow path between some bushes. I can remember that house exactly, even now. It was a low-roofed house with a beautiful garden full of hollyhocks and roses and stocks. I even noticed catnip and rosemary growing. By the open front door, there was an aged woman sitting in a chair. It wasn't a rocking chair. It was a short-legged wooden kitchen chair. The woman was concentrating on something in her lap. It may have been knitting or something similar, when she looked up to see our ragtag group coming near to her garden. Mary raised her hand to wave and let the old woman know that we were lost and needed directions, but this old woman obviously didn't want us near her property. She stood up, raising herself slowly from the chair by using her right hand as leverage on the arm of the chair. Everything seemed to be set in slow motion, and I recall her long skirt and plain white pinny as she began to rant and angrily wave her left arm at us. It was then that we all became suddenly aware of the huge dog at her side. He stood suddenly. She patted his back, and he came bounding towards us, barking and frightening us all. And of course, we ran. We wanted to run straight away from that aged woman and her vicious dog, but there was a barbed wire fence and bushes barring our way. So we had to run parallel to the house until there appeared to be a gap in the bushes where we could squeeze through the barbed wire. It was a small, broken stile with a warped wooden stepping plank. Though still covered by the barbed wire, Mary and Dawn held open this wire so that the children could clamber through, except for me. I was the youngest and couldn't quite keep up with the rest of them. I was lagging behind, and in their panic, everyone else seemed to have forgotten all about me. They were all through the fence and over that stile before I could get there, and so I had to help squeeze myself through. I could hear that dog behind me and glance back to see his huge grey body lumbering nearer and nearer. The house was there still, partially obscured by the bushes and trees. I hooked my right leg through the wire, bent over and then tried to get my head and body between the barbs, and got caught. Mum was suddenly there, yanking me through, and I screamed as I felt something bite into the back of my neck. I was sure that dog had finally reached me, and I was going to die a terrible, terrible death. But I never. It was suddenly deathly quiet again, except for the heavy, laboured breaths and the sighs of relief from us all. We looked back. There was no sign of the woman, her house, the big grey dog, or even the wooden stile and the barbed wire fence we had just climbed through. The only evidence to suggest that we had all just been through something terrible was a small hole in the back of my neck where the barbed wire had sunk in and caused me to bleed. It was at that very moment we all heard a cuckoo. The sun was shining through the trees, and we could see the pathway that led to the groundsman's building close by. The ordeal was over. As I've already stated, we all knew that park and the surrounding area very well. More than this, my family knows of the park and its history quite well also. We can only go so far back in history, and with that research we had discovered that a lord owned the buildings and the land and much of the surrounding area. In fact, listed buildings are still within the park, and it dates back to the early 1830s as a parkland and a recreational area. Before this time, I do not know who lived on the land, though due to the surrounding area and the lay of the land, I am convinced that it was not farmed, though much of the surrounding land was once farmland. So that's my story. I'll leave it to you to try and figure out what happened, who that woman was.